It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening as we share our Wednesday prayer meeting together. Um, as I was in the car a couple of weeks ago, maybe a little more than a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months ago at this time, I was hearing a presentation by, if you ever heard of the person named Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey is one of those financial gurus. He's very big on not having any debt. And so his whole thing is how to get out of debt, how to unload your debt uh, very aggressively. And as he was talking about that, I'm a finance person, so I always find that very interesting. Some people use debt to get more money. Some people believe you should get out of debt. But as I was listening to that, a couple of days later, I read a very interesting verse in the Bible, and it got me to think. And especially as we think of the time of people having difficulty paying student loans, paying home mortgage loans, and the amount of debt people carry, we always think of getting out of this debt. And then this verse struck me that's found in Romans chapter 13, verse 8. And it says, "Owe no one anything except to love one another. For he who loves another has fulfilled the law." Here I begin to see for a moment that Paul uses this very rich language to let us know there is a debt we have to those that are around us. And it is a debt of love to those we come into contact with. Owe no one anything except to love one another. And yes, that word there is agapo, which is that sacrificial type of love. And Christians have a debt to each other and to those outside of our church. And the perpetual debt we owe to those around us is love. But it's difficult to live a life believing, well, I don't owe this, no, I owe this to this person to love them, even when they're unlovable. I owe it to this person as a Christian to give them an agapo kind of love. But to get there, and I think that's what I began to understand as I studied this Romans chapter 12 and 13, where we'll just spend the next 10 to 15 minutes together, is it doesn't just come so easily. And I think Paul understands that. So he begins, many of you may have memorized um, Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, and he says this, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him." Or in some translations, it'll say, "This is your reasonable service." And then verse 2, "Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." Here, Paul is setting the stage for what he is going to be presenting going forward, as if to say, this is the prerequisite required before you can hope to achieve what I'm about to teach you regarding practical living. Without this renewed, transformed mind, what I'm about to say is not possible. I find a lot of times as people may come to me, younger people, youth that I mentor here in Texas, asking, how do you do this? I mean, how can you get to the point where when someone does hurt you, you don't react so aggressively and negatively toward them? And I said, well, it doesn't just happen. It takes this transformation that God creates in your life. And sometimes, as we live in the world now, people are not at peace with all that's going on. Even though they've been in church for 30 years, things are just shaking them and they can't fall asleep. Everything they do is, oh, look at the world is going, and they're drowning in their dread and weariness of the world around them, forgetting that the world is still owned and held by the Lord, and that He has given us promise that He will make things right. And this kind of thinking doesn't just happen. You can't just will it. It has to be an actual transformation of mind. And this is even true when it comes to the love that God wants us to give to those that are around us. And it also has to do with the rest of chapter 12 in Romans. You see, you and I can't evaluate ourselves correctly, verse 3, or give others preference over ourselves, which is in verse 3. That can't happen without a transformation of mind that is born out of a relationship with God. You can't use your gifts in ministry properly with generosity, diligence, compassion, and cheerfulness, all the things he talks about through verse 8 in chapter 12. Neither can we love each other sincerely, or as he says in verse 9, without hypocrisy. Now, this is one church people do very well, is to love with hypocrisy. We can come to church and smile at someone and, say happy Sabbath to them, but not love them. We have a fresh face on, but we have this inner hatred and resentment brewing within us for years at a time. Oh man, I've seen this happen in churches. You may sit on opposite sides of the pew, but man, you've been feuding for 30 years. I'd call that love with hypocrisy. We're just being fake to one another. It's not a sincere love. And that happens when we love with our carnal nature and not allowing the Spirit to show us that the love that he talks about, oh man, it's topsy-turvy, it's upside down, it's anti-world. It is something that this world knows nothing about. The love that God asks of us to give to others, whether it's within our families, our church families, our work families, to those that we come into contact with, it is not a love, it is like the peace that passes all understanding. It's like when Jesus says, peace I leave with you, but not as the world gives. Same way Jesus says in John chapter 15, as the Father has loved me, I have loved you. It's a love that the world knows nothing about. It is a foreign language. It is a foreign object in which they have never experienced. And so for us to be able to give that to someone else, that Christian love, that indebted love, that agape love, oh wow, man. I've just found it is something that requires so much more than our will. It requires our wills to be given to the Lord. And so that's why he says in verses 10 to 13, be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love, in honor giving preference to one another, not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer, distributing to the needs of the saints, given to hospitality. You see, that kind of ability of practical living happens only when we actually have a real connection with the Lord. And I pray that'll be true for us. And that idea that he gives in the last portion of verse 13, given to hospitality, that's really what he's talking about is that in that culture was to have hospitality to strangers, people that are traveling from a far off land, to open up your house to them. Now, that may not be the culture that we have today, but that's the concept. You can start with your family, you can start with your brothers, you can start with your church family, but it must also learn to extend out to even those we do not know. That is Christian love. That is Christian indebtedness. Then chapter 13 begins with Paul dealing with his advice to believers regarding their submission to government. And he says in verse 7, render to all their due. This is 13, verse 7. Taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs are due, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Essentially, make sure you're not indebted to anyone for any of these things. As Christians, we should, in quotes, I would say, pay our bills. And not just our physical bills, but those intangible bills, but like giving honor to those who are due honor. And I hope we can think this way. And I would extend that to a few things I would have you keep in mind for the year. Just a few practical things. Pay your dues with your service to God's kingdom. You've been given a talent or a passion or a skill. You must use it in some way for God's work in ministry to others. Let there not be a debt carried over from year to year where you're saying, what can I do, Lord? Where should I go? Find small ways in which you can use your talent, your skill to be able to, and again, it doesn't have to bring someone into the baptismal pool immediately, but allow the Spirit of God to work through you and minister to someone. It makes no sense, especially us knowing prophetically where we lie and where we are in history. If we believe Jesus is coming soon, don't sit on your hands at home and do nothing. Or if you are at home, reach out to someone with your phone if you're not able to get out. Do something to reach out to someone. If we are stuck in our own little bubbles, we are not paying our bills as they are coming due as Christians. Do something. Find a way to help someone, to be a friend to someone more intentionally. Pay your dues with your generosity. He says there, render to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. In 2025, allow God to show you what he can do when you trust him with your finances. Now, my wife and I found this out recently this past year in 2024. All I've always seen these videos on YouTube of people giving some amount to a person that kind of changes their lives, not just like 50 bucks or 100 bucks, but something a little more. And we've always given to, helping people put in school in India and a couple of children in a couple of, in a country in Uganda and some other places. But we've never really like gone to someone we knew who, by knew, I mean, not like a family member, but like a church member and be like, you know what? I want to give you this. And so there's someone in our church here in Texas. He's a dedicated individual, works for audio visual basically by himself. He has two young children that he had little early in life. And there's trying he and his wife put them in Adventist school, the only Adventist school we have here. And they drive about 30 minutes to put them there. And we decided we just wanted to give them $3,000 in order for them to help with their school fees. Not through some tax deductible way, but just to give it. And he was sincerely thankful. But well, I say that only reason to say that is a few weeks later, this is how God works. Um, I had bills to pay for Rainin. He had a $7,000 hospital bill, and I was paying it kind of monthly. They allow us to pay it monthly, and I still had about um, $5,000 left to pay. And someone calls and says, or sent a letter, and I thought it was fake. And then someone called a little bit later, about 2 days later after I got the letter, and they said, we're allowing you to, if you pay it now, you only owe 50% of what you owe. I owed 5,000, 5,500 something. And now I can only pay half. I only have to pay half, which is about $2,600, almost the exact $3,000 amount that we had just given to this family for their schooling a couple of weeks earlier. My friends, is there some sort of stinginess in your life that is not allowing you to be helpful to those around you with the resources God has given you? Sometimes that's money, not just your talents. And sometimes I pray that we'll do that and we'll pay our bills and be helpful to people with even our money. Pay your dues when it comes to gratitude. Don't skimp on paying that bill when someone has done good for you. Be grateful. And not that you're owed anything in this life, but be grateful when someone extends a helping hand out to you. And don't weary that hand that helps you. Don't take so much advantage of it when you are now able to help someone else that you continually seek for others to help you. Once you receive that help, be grateful and show that gratitude by letting that person know. Write a note to them, send a text to them. Let them know that you are truly grateful for the things that they have done for you. Um, as a church, we can definitely benefit from everyone paying their dues of gratitude and not carrying a debt regarding it. But there is one debt, as I close here, every Christian will carry. Owe no one anything except to love one another. This is a debt we must keep trying to fulfill every day of our lives, but which we will never fully repay. If the church could really make this a reality in their lives at home, at work, at school, at church, just looking for ways to pay our debt of love to our fellow man, we would really make a difference in this world. When this is true in our lives, we won't be so worked up over some minor perceived infraction of someone else. In the church, sometimes this happens. Sometimes we love our rules and our preferences more than we love each other. If we could, we would make a shrine to our preferences and our rules. So we complain about minor things, thinking they are the doctrines of God when they really are just the commandments of you. Our eyes began to see specks everywhere, specks of sawdust in everyone else's life because we love our rules more than those that God has given us to minister to. In 2025, why don't you try giving the priority of love to people instead of your strongly held preferences? In the home, love your families by finding ways to serve them, by spending quality time with one another instead of with things that do not satisfy. And I pray that the unusual, persistent, sincere love we show to others draw them to the Savior that loves them in the same way. Desire of Ages, page 301 says, "The heart of him who receives the grace of God overflows with love for God and for those for whom Christ died." Self is not struggling for recognition. He does not love others because they love and please him, because they appreciate his merits, but because they are Christ's purchased possession. As we go through this year, remember that Christians have a debt. Pay your dues with your diligence in ministry. Pay your dues with your generosity of funds. Pay your dues with your gratitude to others. And God willing, I pray that you will seek to share that agape love with all that you meet, knowing that it is a debt we will never fully pay, but one we will seek to pay every day. God bless you.